Hello, good morning, everyone. My name is Sheikh Owais, and I welcome all of you to this webinar, which is about communication skills and their importance, the criticality of good communication skills in modern times. This is an initiative by Aurelian Skills Academy that has recently been founded to help people, to help youth, and to help experienced professionals deal with corporate and its responsibilities and put them on a path of continuous learning and empower them with skills like wisdom, knowledge, good communication skills, understanding, decision making, and leadership qualities. Right. So, without further ado, let's get started with the presentation. Uh, 24th September 2023 today. And now I want to introduce myself. As I said, my name is Sheikh Owais. People call me Steve. I have started this Aurelian Skills Academy recently, as I said, to help people overcome fear while they're speaking in public, while they're presenting, or everything uh, that makes them a good professional or a good speaker or a good connector or a communicator at that. So I have had an experience of training people from various domains of life, from various corporate domains. So I am a certified corporate and soft skills trainer, and I have more than 12 years of experience training people, coaching and mentoring people. Walaikum salam. So I request everyone to mute themselves, please. Thank you. Okay, so with more than 12 years of experience, as I said, that I have started Aurelian Skills Academy, that would be very helpful, hopefully, for the youth or for people who want to progress in their professional lives or in their personal lives by improving their communication skills. Now, we're going to go through the agenda for today's meeting. First, I'm going to introduce to you what effective communication skills are. It's a rather lengthy process to introduce all of them. And then I'm going to talk about the importance of good communication skills, effective communication skills. And then we will talk about the impact of digital advancements on the communication landscape. And then I would talk about how to develop effective communication skills, right? And then at the end, we'll have the conclusion. Okay, so let's get started. Slide number one would be about introduction to effective communication skills. Now, there are about 10 communication skills that I have sorted out for you um, that include uh, verbal skills, nonverbal skills, and other like leadership skills, conflict management, and everything. So all of those skills contribute to effective communication skills. So starting with verbal communication, what does it mean, verbal communication essentially, and what is the purpose of it? Verbal communication is whatever we say when we use words, when we use sounds, that's called the verbal communication, right? But what is the purpose of verbal communication? Number one, it should be clarity. We should be clear in expressing what we have to say, right? We should not use extra information. We should not use fillers. We should not use fluff. And we should be to the point and precise whenever we're communicating with people. Then, the purpose of having a verbal communication should be listening. We should make ourselves ready. We should be available for the other person. We should open our ears and we should open our heart for the people. And then we should start listening to them. What that is, we're going to talk about that later. And then speaking. When I say speaking, I particularly mean speaking with class, speaking with empathy, right? Understanding that what it means to actually speak with people rather than talk to people. Okay. Now the skill number two, which is nonverbal communication. What are the aspects of it? It's body language because we're now, with the help of our body, our facial expressions, we're not using words essentially, but we're using physical features, expressions to express certain emotions in context of communication, right? And then eye contact. What does it mean? So we need to make sure that people are able to look right into our eyes, or we're able to look right into their eyes, and make sure that we connect with them as humans. Right? That's what eye contact is all about. There are a few rules of how to maintain good eye contact, how to make sure that this eye contact thing is not getting too creepy or it's not getting too and uncomfortable for the other person. Right? So eye contact is it should be very limited, but it should be consistent. right? So there are rules to making eye contact. We're going to talk about them some other time. But right now, the third one is the tone of your voice. So what happens is we sometimes use these two words synonymously. They're not synonymous. They're not one and the same thing. So, for example, when we say voice, somebody is raising or lowering their voice. What we mean is they are increasing or decreasing the volume. Okay, so they're changing their tone. Their tone is either high, up, or low, down. Okay, but they're not one and the same thing. They're two different things entirely. Tone of your voice means the way you change it. You can increase your voice, you can increase the volume, right? You can sound excited, you can sound sad, you can sound disappointed, happy, anything. That would mean your voice. But then when you change it, so we say your tonality is present. You have changed your voice as per you saw fit, as per the context, as per the environment, as per the situation. Okay, so tone is a different thing than voice. Then third skill to effective communications is written communication. So to write, we have to uh, take care of a couple of things. Number one, the language that we're writing in, and a few other things that we're going to talk about. The aspects of it is grammar and spelling. So what is grammar? Grammar means specifically the rules and protocols of a language, either written or verbal. Okay, so there are certain rules that you have to follow while you're writing something or when you're saying something. Okay, then there is spelling. So there's a difference between spellings. Let's say color, the word color, color, and color. There are two different things. Okay, uh, color would be American. When Americans write color, they say color. But when British people write it, they say COLOUR. So we need to be able to differentiate between the two. What it means when we say an American spelling and what it means when we say a British spelling. So there are two variations of this particular word. Similarly, organization. So when we write it ORGANIZ or ZATION and then SATION, there are two different words when it comes to spelling, right? So organization with a Z would be American. Organization with an S would be a British spelling. So spellings are different, okay? But grammar rules do not necessarily change, okay? They're fixed for every particular language. So grammar is static, while as spelling is dynamic, okay? And the second one is organization of data. See, we can pronounce it differently as well. If Americans have to pronounce it, they will say organization, organization. Now, if the British have to pronounce it, they would say organization. Okay, so organization and organization. It's a small variation of pronunciation, and that depends on the accent or the dialect, right, that you're using. Now, what is the difference? What is the difference between the two? Accent is just the variation of producing sounds, the mannerism of sounds that you produce while you're speaking in a particular language, right? Whereas a dialect is something else entirely. A dialect is using particular phrases, right, particular words, particular idioms in a particular situation or in a particular context or in a particular geographical area, right? So when we say different dialects, is let's say Australian dialect, then there is British dialect or English dialect, right? Then there is American dialect. They're essentially not accents. They are also different when it comes to pronunciation, but they have different words, different phrases, different spellings in their language, right? So more importantly, they're dialects rather than just accents. So we need to understand that. So organization of data means how do you relate sentence number three with two and sentence number two with one? So when we write, we have to ensure that there is a relevance. It's called linguistic coherence. So there is coherence between sentence one, sentence two, and sentence three. How do we do that? Now, there are ways to do that. All right. There are some tips and there are some techniques to do that. We're going to talk about them in other sessions. Right. Today, I'm just going to give you a holistic view of what effective communication skills are. All right. So, organization of data. And the third important thing that we need to understand when it comes to good written communication skills is understanding the audience. Okay, you should be aware, who am I speaking with? Who am I talking to? Who is the one who's reading this? Is it a 5-year old? Is it let's say a graduate student? Is it a professional? right? Or is it some kind of a leader? Am I sending this to a minister, right? Or am I sending this story to a little child so that they can read it? So we need to be aware of who we're talking to, who we're addressing. Okay, so that's extremely important when it comes to writing effectively. So what this is I want to give you an idea that what I'm trying to do is I will ensure that we all understand these 10 specific effective communication skills, and then there will be webinars, and then there will be programs that would specifically talk about how do we improve every single one of them. Okay, so that's extremely important to understand. Now the fourth one is listening skills. So this is unbelievably important. I mean, if you're not a good listener, you cannot be a good speaker. Okay, so please keep that in mind. Now, good listening skills. What do I mean by that? What are the aspects of good listening? Active listening. Now, there is a difference between hearing and listening. You're hearing everything around you because you've got ears, right? You've got functional ears. So they receive sound that comes from the environment outside, and then they process it, and your brain knows that something is going on around you. There is a car that's revving outside your house, or maybe somewhere near you, right? There's a child who's crying. There are so many different things that you can hear. But then there is something that's called listening. I hope you're listening to me. How does that differentiate itself from hearing? Listening means when you're using your ears, also you're using your eyes. You're looking at me. You're trying to see what's on the screen, for example, right? And you're focusing on it. Remember, every skill needs muscles almost, right? That we know of. If, for example, typing is a skill, it needs your hand muscles to be very strong, right? Very consistent, very reliable. And what you will do after that is, you will write consistently, you would type consistently. Okay, so your hand muscles are regularly repeating this, exercising and practicing to write. So your hand muscles have pushed you to a position where you can type away very efficiently without even looking at the keyboard. So that's called muscle memory, right? Similarly, if you do bodybuilding, right, if you do running, it requires particular muscles of your body, right, to be trained. Similarly, when it comes to listening, it requires continuous practice. Every skill needs continuous practice. Okay, you cannot have a skill and then not exercise it, not practice it for 10 years, and then after 10 years still expect to have it as sharp as you did before. So you always need to refine those skills. You always need to work on those skills. And similar is the example for listening. You need to practice active listening. You need to sit down. You need to talk to people. You need to listen to people. You need to force yourself to sit down and shut up and listen. That's what I do. If I have to talk to someone, I force myself to shut up, right? And I focus on listening to them. So that's what active listening means, when you're voluntarily listening, when you're not being forced, or when you're not just hearing things. You're listening to them if you're actively doing it. All right. Then the other important thing, one of the most important things that I have a very special place for in my heart, is empathy. What is empathy? We need to understand there are three levels of this. One would be kindness, the second one would be compassion, and the third one would be empathy. So, what is kindness? You can be kind towards trees, you can be kind towards animals, you can be kind towards everything, right? So, what does it mean? That you don't want to harm them, you don't want to hurt, right? You don't want to destroy things, right? So, that's what kindness means. Now, when it comes to compassion, what does that mean? It is, let's say, kindness 2.0. Okay, compassion is, so for example, if some of you, let's say one of you comes to me, we have Yasir Khan here, so I'll take his example. So if Yasir comes to me and says, hey Steve, I've got a headache, right? We'll go, oh, I'm so sorry about that, I'm so sorry to hear about that, right? So take some rest, that's okay. So that would be showing kindness. I don't want to hurt him, I feel bad about him, right? Because he's got a headache. Then there is compassion. It is like kindness 2.0. So when I'm compassionate towards Yasser, and Yasser comes to me, he says, Steve, I've got a headache. I say, Yasser, I'm so sorry to hear about that, man. You need to take some rest. You know what? Here is some paracetamol. There is some paracetamol. Go ahead and take some rest. Okay? So that's one way to show my compassion towards Yasser. Okay? Then there is empathy. Empathy can be called kindness 2.1, or maybe kindness 3, or as we'd like to call it in modern terminology, kindness pro max ultra. That is empathy. Okay, what do I mean by that? Empathy means being in other person's shoes, right? Stepping into other person's shoes, understanding things as per their perspective, right? Knowing that there are different variations of things, knowing, understanding that my perspective is not the only perspective. The other person might have a different perspective and maybe a better perspective than mine, right? That is empathy. And then seeing things as per them, as per someone else's perception, right? So when Yasser comes to me and says, "Hey, Steve, I've got a headache," now, what I can do is I can simply say, "Oh, I'm sorry," or I can give him paracetamol, and then I'll be like, "Okay, so here's a paracetamol. Take about a rest for about 15 minutes, and then do your work again." So that would be compassion. Still, I'm doing something that I can do at this point. Okay, but when it comes to empathy, I would give Yasser some paracetamol. I'd be like, "Hey, Yasser, here you go. Here's some paracetamol. Take some rest. Take about like half an hour maybe, and then after that, go home." You know why? Because empathy means doing to others like you want done unto yourself. So if I've got a headache, what I would want is to go home. Somebody allowing me to go home, giving me some medication, asking me to take some rest, and then I don't want to work today. I just want to go home. And if I do that for the other person, right? If I value them just as much as I value myself, that means I'm showing empathy. Thinking that the other person is literally as important as I am. Okay, so that's what it means to show empathy. And when it comes to listening skills, empathy would mean respecting people, not interrupting them. Because what do you expect when you're talking to people? You expect them to listen to you, you expect their attention, you expect them to not interrupt you. Okay, that's what you expect. So that's exactly what empathy would mean, doing all those things or not doing all those things, right? Then the other one is patience. So we have to relax, we have to calm down. We don't have to interrupt the other person. We have to listen to their point of view 100% first. You don't have to jump to conclusions. It's very important because there are certain aspects of it that impact our patience level, which is prejudice, which is discrimination, judgment. We're very judgmental towards people. When it's our faults, we become the best lawyers. When it's other people's faults, we become the best judges. So we start judging people based on maybe one interaction or two interactions with them. Maybe when you interacted with them the first time, they were not well. Maybe their health was not well. Maybe they had a fight with their partner. Maybe they had an argument outside the house, outside the office, or wherever you meet them, right? So giving people another chance, being patient with them, understanding that they might be coming from a different perspective, being empathetic and being patient with them. That is what listening skills are all about, right? Not wanting to respond. So what we do is when we disagree with people on something, we talk to them and then we argue with them. But the problem is that we argue to respond. We don't argue to find the right answer. We don't argue to find the truth. We argue just to respond. Okay, so that's the kind of a thing we need to understand, that patience is extremely important when we're demonstrating our listening skills. Okay, so the other fifth effective communication skill is interpersonal skills. So interpersonal skills involves you and someone else. That someone else might be an individual or maybe a group. So, for example, you're talking to your team, you're talking to your employees, you're talking to your friends, or you're giving a speech essentially. That would mean interpersonal. So there are at least two persons involved in this type of skill, in this type of communication. Okay? Now, interpersonal skills include conflict resolution. Because see, when you understand that there is another person in front of me, another person means another mindset, another perspective, another ideology, right? So you might have a disagreement, you might have a conflict amongst yourself, but the purpose should be, and the aspects of good interpersonal skills are, you should be able to resolve conflicts. Now, there are methods to resolve conflicts. How do we do that? As I said, we will have other sessions where we will talk about conflict resolution. How do we exactly do that? Then, the purpose of interpersonal skills essentially is building relationships, building reputations, right? Building a connection with others. So what happens is when we are discussing things with people, or let's say debating with people, we tend to focus more on winning the argument rather than winning the person. You may win the argument, but you will lose the person. That's not the purpose of good interpersonal communication. Okay, the purpose should be building relationships rather than losing those relationships. Then the third one is negotiation. Okay, this is very critical. Negotiation is compromising, right? So my point is A, your point is B. You know what? Let's just compromise on point C. Okay? You're right. I don't think I'm wrong either, but let's just give another perspective to it. Let's get something from your point, let's get something from my point, and try to negotiate on the middle ground. We should be able to do that. And that's what interpersonal skills are all about. How do we do that? As I said, we'll learn them in the near future. Then another skill for effective communication is adaptability. Now, what does that mean? Adaptability means you should be able to modify your behavior. You should be able to change how you speak, how you address people, how you connect with them, based on what your audience is, based on what the environment is like, based on what the context is. Okay? So, aspects are style flexibility. We all have our own unique styles of conversation, our unique style of communicating and connecting with others, right? So we should be able to moderate and change it and modulate it up and down sometimes based on where we are, based on what we're exactly doing, who we're talking to. We do this in our daily lives. We talk to our parents differently than we talk to our friends. With parents, it's a bit more of a very relaxed kind of a casual conversation, but very respectful, right? And sincere and loving, right? But with our friends, it's more casual, it's more friendly, it's more humorous. Okay? If you're joking around with your friends and all, so it becomes more humorous. So we change our style. When you're in front of your principal or your teachers or your bosses or your managers or supervisors, that behavior changes more. It becomes more stringent, it becomes more strict. And we're able to control ourselves because we know there's a different guy in front of us. Okay, so style flexibility is very important, and that's one of the aspects of adaptability. Then there is cultural sensitivity, extremely important. This is specifically for those people who are dealing with people from other places, right? So, for example, there is a person from South India, okay, and then there's a person from North India. They will have two different cultural opinions, okay, and they will have their cultural identities as separate as North and South, literally, right? So, we need to understand there is a difference between a Northern Indian person and a Southern Indian person, and we should be mindful of those cultural gaps, cultural differences. So, similarly, if there is an American person, then if there is a British person, okay, so they have two different countries, they have two different cultures, right? Very similar, but they're two separate cultures, right? So, for example, humor is very important. Humor means joking around with people. So, something that an American finds funny is not necessarily to be perceived funny by the British person, right? So, for example, you can joke about colonialism with an American person, and they would continue talking about it, right? They would kind of lend you a hand creating another joke on colonialism. But I don't think every British person would actually appreciate a joke on colonialism, right? Because colonialism had a very dark history, and the British people might be a bit kind of uncomfortable discussing colonialism. So as people, as let's say professionals, right, as somebody who would like to become a good communicator, a good connector, right, we should be able to differentiate between these two cultures and hence be very sensitive to the differences of culture between two people or more. Okay, so that's adaptability. Then there is presentation skills, extremely important skills, right? What are presentation skills? They're basically you with skills when it comes to inform people, like I'm doing right now. Okay, what happens in presentation? There is one person who's talking, one person who's speaking, and the other people are listening. Okay, so you have to understand it's usually a one-way conversation because it's a specific situation where you have to give information to the rest of the people. Okay, so in those presentation skills, we need to remember number one is learning public speaking. Number one is understanding how do I speak with confidence in front of a large gathering, right? And trust me, one of the most important things to do this, to gather this, to muster up the courage to speak in front of people is knowledge. If you have knowledge that goes slightly above the knowledge level of an average person, you would be more confident than an average person. Okay, so talking about learning public speaking, we should be aware that having good knowledge, having good understanding of the topic at hand, can be extremely helpful to develop a lot of confidence within yourself. So that's very important. Then there is gestures, there is facial expressions, body language, as we talked about earlier, right? So making sure you're using appropriate body language, appropriate gestures when you're speaking in front of the public. right? So all of those things and many more to come in the next sessions. Second is being able to use visual aids. See, modern times are times of technology, technological advancements, right? So we need to understand that if we do not know how to use visual aids, how to use technology, right, we would not be able to present in front of them. Okay, so using visual aids like using computers, using projectors, using slides. Maybe you're let's say on a stage, and then you're using some props. Okay, props like you're using a garland of flowers. You're using a dummy, let's say a teddy bear, or maybe a dummy laptop to demonstrate certain things. So we should be able to use visual aids so that we can relate those visual aids with our content. So that's what effective presentation skills would mean. Then feedback. This is the backbone of good communication when it comes to improvement. Okay, the aspects of feedback is feedback delivery, then there is feedback reception. Okay, so I want to talk about this feedback delivery and feedback reception. Feedback delivery means when you're giving feedback to other people. Okay, once you think about it, when you give people a feedback, you have two intentions, either of the two intentions. Number one, either you want to make sure they improve, okay, or second is either you want to insult or you want to insult them. Okay, either you can be uh, giving that feedback as constructive criticism or destructive criticism. Okay, so when it comes to delivery of feedback, there are three things we need to remember. We need to give timely feedback, in time feedback. So it's not like I see Yasser, I'm using Yasser as an example here right now. So if I see Yasser making a mistake right now, so I will not wait until 6 months have passed and when he has a meeting with his manager, right? I will give him the feedback right now. I say, Yasser, this is what I have observed. I think we can improve on this. That's being timely in delivering the feedback. Second is being positive in the feedback. We should never use negative language. Hey, you could not do this properly. You could not do that properly. That's using negative language, right? So that's number two. We should always use positive. Yasser, instead of this, can we try this? Oh, it was a very good presentation. Excellent, excellent skills, right? Can we try to do it differently now this time? And then give your feedback in a positive manner, right? That's two. Third one that I think is the most important one is directional feedback. You should also tell the other person that how they can improve on this. My feedback is your presentation skills are good, but you can improve on your body language. It's not just that you can improve on your body language. I should tell the person how they can improve their body language. So, being timely, in time feedback. Second is being positive, positive feedback. Third one is directional feedback. You should direct them how they can improve themselves, apparently. Okay? So, that's what feedback means. The ninth effective communication skill means emotional intelligence. Uh, what is our understanding of emotional intelligence? We should ask ourselves this for a few seconds, right? Emotional intelligence means being able to control and navigate our emotions through all the different situations. Okay, so what are the aspects of it? Number one is self awareness, number two, environmental awareness, and number three is social awareness. Now, I want to start with social awareness first. So, social awareness means you're aware of all the people around you, your friends, your family, your siblings, your cousins, right? You know how they're feeling right now. So, I should not say a certain thing right now. So, you control yourself because you know. For example, if you're at a marriage party, right? Um, you will not say something that is morbid. You would not say something that is sad. You would try to make up conversations that are funny, that are humorous, right? That are positive, engaging instead. And then if we're at a funeral, we're not going to crack a joke. It is very inappropriate, right? Cracking jokes at a funeral. So we are controlling our behavior because we understand the social dynamics of the group where we are. We understand where we are. We understand what people will be open to hear and what people would find offensive. So that's called being socially aware. And then another aspect of it is um, understanding how the other person might feel. As I say, empathy. So social awareness does have an empathetic part associated with it, right? Second one, I would go bottom to top, which is environmental awareness. You should know where we are. We should know where we are, right? For example, you would not say something that is considered inappropriate in a society. In this environmental awareness, you do not need to know everybody's particular mindset. Okay, you just need to be aware of your surroundings. All right. So you cannot talk about, let's say, a particular political topic in a certain part of the world. All right. So imagine if you're surrounded by a place where there are surrounded by Trump supporters. Okay? You're not going to say something against Trump. Right? And if you're at a, let's say, a democratic convention, you're not going to be very vocal about saying something against Biden if you disagree, even if you disagree with them, right? So understanding your environment so that we can ensure our safety, okay, so that we can ensure that we are being perceived as positive people, not somebody who's a fuss creator, not an antisocial element, right? Or the mischievous element. And then the most important thing is self awareness. What is self awareness? Being aware of your own self. Okay, this is very like self explanatory, but what does it actually mean being self aware? There are times when you're upset, there are times when you're happy, there are times when you're disappointed, right? And understanding what is the cause, what is the reason for my happiness, what is the exact cause for my disappointment, why am I really sad? So going back to those questions, why is this making me sad because of this, why is that making me sad? So asking yourself a few whys to getting to the bottom of it, that what makes me happy, what makes me sad. Now emotional intelligence has a very important role in dictating how we behave as people and how we treat ourselves. Now there are three zones of a person when it comes to emotional intelligence. Number one is hyper arousal zone, hyper, HYPER. The second one is hypo arousal zone. The third one is a resilient zone. So, hyper arousal zone is when you get angry, when you get so excited, impulsive, you do not calculate things. You start reacting rather than responding. What is the difference between the two, the reactions and the responses? Reactions are mindless, they're thoughtless, they don't have a rationale behind them. Reactions are instantaneous, they're impulsive. You do not put a thought into those reactions. But responses, you sit down, you take a step back, you calm yourself down first, and then you're like, okay, so this person said this to me. How do I respond to it? If I respond in a similar way, will it make us different? No, there will be no difference between that person and me. So if that person says something bad to me, let's say they abuse me verbally, right? Am I the one who should abuse them back? Because if I do, then there is literally no difference between us. Or do I respond in a more civil manner, which is, hey, I'm sorry, I don't know why you abused me, uh, but this really hurt me. This is very hurtful. So can we talk about it? Why you actually were so angry with me? So trying to figure out why, what caused that anger outburst. Okay, so being self-aware leads to us understanding our hyperarousal zones. Why we should get angry, why we shouldn't get angry. Well, there is no reason why we should get angry, but we should know why do we get angry, right? And why we shouldn't get angry. So that's hyperarousal zone. Then there is hypoarousal zone. I'm sure all of us know that feeling when we're so sad, when we're so disappointed, when we're so disheartened. We just want to sit down and say absolutely nothing. We just want to curl up in a ball and cry, maybe put a blanket over our heads and just don't say anything. So what it does, it's essentially like turning off the computer, right? So we should know what our hyperarousal zone looks like, what causes us to be disappointed, what causes us to be sad, what causes us to want that we want to switch off our computer, right? What leads us to our hyperarousal zones? Identifying those is emotional intelligence and self-awareness. Then there is a resilient zone. A resilient zone is the comfort zone where you're extremely strong. You get back to normal, to do what you're actually supposed to do. If my manager screams at me, right, or if my senior or supervisor screams at me, will it disappoint me, right? Will it hurt me? Will it dishearten me? Well, maybe to a great extent, yes. But how do I get back to the resilient zone? Maybe I go out and take a walk, right? Maybe I go and take a have a cup of coffee, right? Maybe I call my friends up. Maybe I talk to my friends. Yeah, you know what? My manager, my supervisor said this to me, right? So they can talk back to you, and then they're like, "It's all right, no problem." And understanding the manager, the supervisor, they shouted at you, they screamed at you. Maybe they have a target on their head, right? They need to finish those sales, they need to meet those targets. So understanding different people's perspective, as we talked earlier about, is called empathy as well. So empathy is an extremely important factor, a critical factor in being emotionally intelligent. Okay, so self-awareness, very important. We talked about hyperarousal zone, where you're very impulsive, where you don't calculate things properly and you just react instantaneously. Then there is hypoarousal zone, where you don't want to do anything, you just want to sit down, you just want to cry, you're so sad, you want to listen to sad music and everything. That's your hypoarousal zone. Then there is your resilience zone, where you become very, very, very strong. So the more you traverse back and forth from hyperarousal zone to hyperarousal zone to back to your resilience zone, this is how you practice being more resilient. This is how we practice being more strong. Okay, so this is how we develop our emotional intelligence. And the 10th effective communication skill is disagreement. It is an unbelievably important skill. You don't need to lock horns with anyone over small disagreements, or maybe even over large disagreements. Okay? The purpose of disagreement handling should be, number one, to comprehend what the other person is saying, to actually understand what they're saying. Okay? Not jumping to conclusions, being active listeners. Then, objectivity. We need to tell ourselves that it is not the person that we're disagreeing with, it is the point that we disagree with. Okay, the person, again using Yasser as an example, so I'm not disagreeing with Yasser as an entire person. No, Yasser made a point that I disagree with. He says England is the best football team in the world, and I say no, America is the best football team in the world, right? So he has one opinion, I have another. So it's just a matter of opinions. Two opinions are different. If you ask Yasser, do you like pizza, he will say yes. If you ask me, do you like pizza, I would say yes. Internally, we're the same people. We're very, very, very similar. But it's just at one point that we disagree on. So we need to be very objective that it is not the person that we're disagreeing with, it is the point that the person is making that we disagree with. Okay, that's number one. Number two is evidence and statistics based responses. So when you say something, when you respond to a question, that question should be backed by evidence. It should be backed by data points, facts, statistics, figures, right? We cannot make things up willy nilly and expect the other person to accept our viewpoint. We have to be very, very cautious when we're making any claims without evidence, right? So being objective. The other one that should be the primary purpose of our disagreement handling, which is resolution. Now, there is a difference between a disagreement and a conflict. What is it? Which is disagreement simply means difference of opinion. Okay, you have one opinion, I have another, right? Let's say someone says pineapple can go on a pizza, and I would say no, it's an abomination. Pineapple doesn't go on a pizza. So there are two different opinions. Now, we can have a disagreement on that, or we can escalate it to a level of conflict. What does conflict mean? Conflict means a clash where neither of the parties is willing to change their opinion, change their stance, and they're very arrogant, very adamant, very strict, right? And very rigid on their position. Whatever you say, I'm not going to change my opinion. That is when it leads to a conflict. We're aware of so many conflicts in modern times, right? So we should nip it in the bud when it's in the disagreement stage and not let it escalate up until it becomes conflict, a full fledged clash between two people, two countries, two teams, or whatever it is. Okay, so that's the 10th disagreement handling skill. Now, let me talk about the importance. Why do we think communication skills are important? Effective communication skills are important. Okay, because they play a very critical role in our lives. Number one, personal life. How do they play a very important role in our personal life? Number one is understanding. It develops our understanding of other people, our family, our friends, our colleagues, right? Like in a personal way. Then it develops trust in the families. Okay, your siblings are able to trust you when you connect with them. So if there is an elder brother and then there's a younger brother, and let's say a younger brother starts to smoke, and the elder brother gets really angry, so he gets into the hyper arousal zone and he starts to shout and scream and maybe hit the younger brother, right? They would not be able to connect with their elder brothers. Why? Because the elder brother has created this wall between them and their younger brother, right? So they were not able to tell them. Maybe, let's say, the younger brother started smoking because they were feeling sad. They were hurt somehow, and they thought that cigarette smoking would be an escape from that hurt, from that disappointment. if the elder brother had not created that wall between them and the younger brother would have felt much better going to the elder one and saying, "Hey, brother, I'm facing this problem. I'm very sad. Could you please help me through it? Could you please guide me through it?" So it's the responsibility of the elder one to make sure they're the guiding lamp for the younger child. So we need to create this trust by communicating with our younger ones effectively. We need to show them that it's okay to be hurt, it's okay to be angry, it's all right. We need to respond to this rather than react to this. Okay. Arshid Mir has raised a question. Arshid, please give me one moment. I will finish the slide and then I'll take your question. Thank you. Thank you. Then there is conflict resolution. Okay. Good communication skills help us in resolving conflicts. And how do they do that? You're able to communicate things to both the parties. Let's say party A and party B are having a conflict or they're having a disagreement, which they can sort out themselves. But if it escalates to the level of a conflict, then you're able to make sure that you explain things to party A, you explain things to party B, and you're able to negotiate, as we talked about earlier, negotiations, right? You're able to negotiate, hence causing the conflict to go down. All right. Then there is healthy relationships. That is one of the outcomes, one of the results and consequences of good and effective communication. Okay? You're able to develop those relationships that are mature, that are healthy, that are beneficial for everyone around. Okay. So, all right. So let's hear from Arshad. Yeah, Arshad, you had a question. Please go ahead. Thank Thank you. Thank you so much, Arshad. I really appreciate your kind words and really appreciate the enthusiasm that you've joined the call with. Thank you. Thanks once again. All right, team. So let's get back to the presentation. And Arshad has been a great friend of mine and a great mentor in many, many ways. And I wish that all of us learn from each other, right? All of us learn from this session as much as possible, right? Maybe for 5 minutes, if we improve ourselves, in those 5 minutes, we improve ourselves for the rest of our lives. I think that would be mission successful for me. And, I hope we all learn something from this session. All right. So now, importance of effective communication in professional life. We talked about the personal life consequences and importance. Now, let's talk about professional life. When you have good and effective communication skills, you create an atmosphere where you are the inspiring figure. You inspire people. You become a leader. You become a true leader if you're able to connect with your audience, if you're able to connect with your team, your employees, like we call them, right? So, leadership is an entirely different thing because what I do is I have trained leaders. I train leaders right now. I train trainers and I train corporate leaders, corporate managers right now. And what I see in them is they have a, a different idea of what leadership truly means. There is a difference between management and leadership. A leader and a manager, they're two different roles altogether, right? You can be a leader as well as a manager, right? So if you're a leader, it's not necessary that you're a manager. Okay? You can be, let's say, a fresh person in a corporate. Still, you can possess leadership qualities. Okay? You don't need to have a team. You don't need to supervise a bunch of people to be a leader. A leader can, anyone can be a leader, right? Even a 5-year old can show leadership qualities in certain situations, right? Managers, however, are those people who manage other people, who manage other resources, who manage other tools. Okay? They're just managing it. Leadership's primary focus is connection. So you should be able to connect with your audience. You should be able to connect with the people who are either reporting to you, right, or reporting to someone else. You can be a colleague to some people. You can also be their mentor. You can also be their leader. You will be in the same group. You will be reporting to the same managers, but you can still possess and show and demonstrate leadership qualities. So they're two different things entirely. There are multiple sessions for that leadership learning as well. I hope we all join them later on, hopefully very soon. So you can inspire leadership qualities in others once you're able to connect with them properly. Okay, once you're able to have effective communication skills. The other one is effective guidance. If you see there is someone who needs particular input from you, who needs some feedback from you, and if you deliver to them in the most articulate, clear, precise manner, right, they would be able to work on it. If you give them vague, unnecessary feedback, they will not understand what they have to work on particularly. So it's extremely important that we're focused, we're very clear in our communication skills. The other one is collaboration. If you have effective communication skills, you can incite people, right, to collaborate with each other. Two different people, two entirely different people who do not like each other, if they have a good manager who possesses leadership qualities, right, what they can do is they can create an atmosphere, an environment that can make sure that these two people who do not like each other collaborate, okay, even if they disagree with each other. Okay, so that's what effective communication skills do. It fosters a culture of collaboration. Then there is conflict resolution. If you're not able to communicate properly, if you're not able to connect with the people properly, then conflict resolution is impossible. Okay, you cannot resolve any conflict. Okay, now effective communication skills importance in social life. We talked about personal life, we talked about professional life, and now let's talk about social life. Sharing information. The closest example that I can give you is right now. This is what I'm doing. This is sharing information with everyone in my social life. You do not report to me. I'm not your manager. I'm not your supervisor, right? Or you're not my immediate family, of course, right? So you're not my children, you're my brothers, sisters, you know, in the most literal way. Then it is very important that we understand that in social life, sharing information is extremely important because it leads to a sense of democratization. You know, you democratize things. And what does it mean, democratizing things? It means that you're showing other people that their their votes, their opinion, it counts. It's important. You are as valuable as I am. So what's the concept of democracy? I know we talk about it all the time when we say government for the people, of the people, by the people, but that's not what I mean. The question is, what is it? What is the essence of democracy? Is that everybody is equal, everybody is valued equally. Well, ideally, that's the definition of democracy, right? So when you tell people that Rashid is as important as Arshid, Arshid is as important like Fazil and Nadeem and Yasser and Liaquat, they're all equally important, and you're all equally important as I am. Okay, so that's what democratization means, giving value to other people. If you're not able to communicate properly, you cannot do that. You cannot show and demonstrate people that you value them as much as you value yourself. The other one is it will lead to what? It will lead to social change. It will lead to environmental change. Okay. So, for example, if two people are talking about cleaning, let's say your neighborhood, okay, then the conversation has started. If they're able to communicate it to five more people effectively, they will have five more volunteers to go for a cleaning drive around your area, right? So you need to stand up first. You need to start communicating, and then you need to start collaborating with other people. And that's how you can drive social change. For example, there are debates, there are sessions on substance abuse, okay, like the drug menace that we're facing right now. There are seminars, there are webinars, there are events regarding, let's say, domestic abuse. All right, women are facing domestic abuse, men are facing domestic abuse. Right now, to be honest, it doesn't really matter what gender you are. You can face abuse, whatever gender you are, right? So now it is gender equality that we talk about. Right now, it is feminism as we talk about, right? Those were ideas the suffragettes of England started, right? And they gave us an idea that, feminism, or let's say gender equality, doesn't mean that one gender is better than the other. It means that everybody is equal. So democratization of the whole gender spectrum, right? So everybody is equal. So that's the whole idea of it. But then obviously there are some the new forces that have hijacked certain objectives, certain noble causes, and all that. But it doesn't mean that we stop doing it. So, for example, if there are people who are standing up against substance abuse, drug menace, right, and we see one of them doing drugs themselves, we're not going to be offended by the movement, by the webinars, by the content of the movement. But we can be like, okay, this person talks about drug abuse, substance abuse, and all, and then they abuse substance themselves, right? So we don't need to be disgruntled with the movement, with the cause, right? We need to relax and we need to do our bit. We need to wake up, we need to get up, and then make sure that we are the ones who is driving the social change rather than letting someone else take over or hijack for that matter. Okay, so social changes come out of all of these points, like sharing information, democratization. Then cultural exchange. There are cultural exchanges happening every day. People are sending, let's say, universities are sending students from their countries to other countries, and they're receiving students from other countries. So they're sharing information, they're sharing culture. You know, uh, Ancient Sumerians, about 4,000, 5,000 years ago in Mesopotamia, right? They were a very kind of concentrated culture, and a very, very advanced culture, right? Then people started to visit them from outside of Mesopotamia, right? And then they shared their culture with certain. Okay, now we're finding that Mesopotamians actually had trade agreements, or let's say trade functions going on with other cultures as well, right? And that laid the foundation of modern society as we know it right now. If that cultural exchange had not happened, who knows, we would not have been here like we are right now. Okay, so cultural exchange is extremely important. Number one, for the overall benefit of humanity. Number two, that cultural exchange makes us socially and culturally sensitized. It lets us know that there are other people, there are other cultures, there are other opinions. That's the most important thing of cultural exchange, to understand there are multiple opinions, multiple cultures that are prevalent, that are flourishing in the world, and we need to respect all of those cultures. We need to respect their right to have their culture, their right to have an opinion. Okay, and that's what leads us to become better communicators, because we're able to be empathetic and accommodating. All right, so that's the importance of effective communication. Now, quickly, I want to wrap up as consequences of poor communication. All right, what do these poor communication skills lead to? What do they do? Number one, they create misunderstandings. If you're not able to articulate yourself well enough, you are bound to create more misconceptions, more misunderstandings that you started with. So we need to be articulate enough to make sure that everybody understands what you're saying. We should leave no room for ambiguity. We should ask people to ask questions if they don't understand anything. Okay? Then there is conflicts. If you're not able to communicate properly, then you're bound to create conflicts. You will cause people to be disgruntled. You will cause people to be irritated because your policies, your structures, your rules, your regulations, your content is not clear. It's not unambiguous. There is so much of confusion and interest, right? So you will cause more conflicts. Then business losses. If you're not able to talk to your clients, your consumers, your customers properly, right, you will lose business. That's the whole idea of good communication skills in sales and business development. Okay? Then polarization. extremely important. Us versus them. You will create a divide between two groups or two people if you're not able to communicate properly. Okay? If we communicate, let's say 50% of what we wanted to communicate, right, it would leave 50% of empty space. And since people have two different perceptions, two different mindsets, those two different people will fill those 50% with their own opinions, right, own stereotypical ideas, and that would definitely cause a rift between the two. So we should complete a conversation. We should not let go of a conversation in the middle of the conversation. Complete the conversation, complete your point, and if the other person is not willing to listen to you, give it some time, then reach out to them, try to talk to them, and try to sort out the differences in the most humble and most respectful way. Okay, so let's make sure that we're not polarizing people, we're not setting people up against each other, we're not creating this gang that goes against another gang. Okay, so that's very important. Then poor communication leads to discouragement. If you're not able to praise and encourage people, you're most certainly going to discourage them. Okay, so positive language is extremely important, as I said, even if you're giving feedback to them. So encouragement is very important. And if you're not able to communicate properly, you're definitely going to discourage them. Okay, now the digital landscape, the digital technological landscape that we have today, how has it impacted? Now we know we can literally send a gigabyte of data in a few seconds all across the world. It doesn't have to be restricted or anything. You can literally like take a video, record a video, and then upload it immediately. And with 5G speeds, it's just a matter of seconds. Okay. Now, how does it benefit us sharing so much of data so quickly, instantaneously with the rest of the world? The benefits are it's instantaneous. You don't waste your time. You do it very quickly. Okay? So it gives you more time to collaborate, to think, and do other positive and productive things. Second is far reach. You're reaching out to the rest of the world, right? In a matter of a few seconds. Then the other one is convenience. It's very convenient. You just click a picture and then send it over. You do not have to wait for the postman to arrive, and then you can write a letter and then hand them the postcard or the letter, and then wait for weeks or maybe months to have that letter delivered. Right? You can do it instantaneously and very, very, very convenient. Okay. And the fourth one, the benefit is remote working. You can work remotely. You don't necessarily have to go to the office, go to the premises, go to the place where things are happening. You can just work from where you are. We see now work from home policies, right? Amazing policies. Now, the modern world, the educated world is adopting to the work from home or hybrid model. You know what? You can work some days from home and some days you have to come to office, or it's okay. You know what? Work from home. That's perfectly fine. It saves on pollution and it relieves people of stress and anxiety. Some people don't like to come to office. Some people don't like to travel, right? So it does that. So now we have the options to do that, but some people choose deliberately not to do that for some unknown reasons. So, yes, this is a benefit of the digital technological advancement that has happened. And the most important thing is collaboration. You're able to collaborate, okay, uh, with anyone that you want and very quickly, very efficient. Okay, so that collaboration is extremely important. Now, what are the drawbacks of this digital landscape, the digital advancement? Right? Number one, misinterpretation. So when we share things, important things, very quickly, right? Sometimes we're bound to miss certain things. Sometimes we're bound to skip certain things. And as I said, if you skip certain things, you leave a gap. And everybody is allowed to fill that gap with their own perception, with their own interpretations, right? So sharing a lot of information very quickly, you share, let's say, 1,000-word essay with me or an article with me, and I go through it very quickly. I read half of it. I don't read the entirety of it. What does that cause me? It causes me to create a different sense of understanding of the article when I haven't understood the article. All right. So we misinterpret data. Overload. We have so much of information to take in. You scroll on your Instagram, on your Facebook so quickly, right? There is so much of information. It's called information overload. Our brain is not able to comprehend it properly. Okay. Then privacy concerns. You click somebody's picture, they don't want you to have that picture in your phone. You click it and you send it over to the rest of the world like this instantaneously. that causes privacy concerns, right? There is no privacy anymore, as many ethical hackers would like to say. Okay, so these are some drawbacks. And the one that has most impact is fake news. Every day we see WhatsApp messages, WhatsApp videos, Facebook messages that are entirety based on lies, pseudoscience. Nothing is backed by evidence, but yet people accept that as truth. Okay, so fake news can be spread just because of this instantaneous sharing, this digital communication landscape, or the digital advancement that we have seen recently. Now, how do we develop effective communication skills? I'm going to quickly go through it because it's already 11 and I want to wrap up very quickly. How do we become better communicators? Number one that I tell myself is to shut up and listen to the other person. Okay? We have to fight the urge to respond to people. It's okay. Let them finish. Then ask them a question. Okay, is that all that you wanted to ask? All right. Is that okay if I respond to the question, if I answer you now? And when they say, okay, it's all right, then go ahead, do it. So fight the urge to respond immediately. Okay, relax, listen to them, understand it, then make up your thoughts, create those thoughts, relate those thoughts, right? And then share them in a positive and proper manner, respectful manner. Then articulation. Let's make sure we all use as less words as possible to convey the most meaning. There's a story of Thirsty Crow. Thirsty Crow's story can be read out in 50 words. It can also be read out in 500 words. And when do we do that? See, if we have to talk to people, if you have to narrate the story to adults, then you can use 50 words because most of the adults know the story. But if you have to narrate the same story to children who do not know the story, you can use 500 words because you need to add more detail. You need to add colorful details to it so that children are able to imagine it vividly. So we need to identify when 50 words are required and when 500 words are required. Okay, so that's all articulation. As I said, empathy. That's the third point. Empathize with the person who you're speaking with or who is speaking with you. Then, adaptability. Make sure we leave room to change ourselves, to update ourselves, to improve ourselves. Make sure we're dynamic, not static. Then, continuous improvement. How do we develop effective communication skills? Getting more and more feedback. What I'm going to do is I have recorded the session today, and I'm going to go through the session and I would work on my, let's say, body language, my words, my vocabulary, maybe my pronunciation, my accent. I'm going to work on it because I will watch the video with the purpose of improving myself. Okay, so continuous improvement is very important, right? So we need to be open to learning. That's how we can improve continuously. Okay, so the conclusion is what are effective communication skills? We know there are 10 effective communication skills. We talked about them in detail, and then we talked about the digital landscape. How does it impact those skills? And then how do we develop those skills? Okay, so if you guys have any questions, if you guys have any confusion or anything you want to know more, you can all scan this QR code from your screen or take a screenshot of this, and you can send me an email at aurelianskills@sheikhowais.com. Everyone, please take a screenshot of this, save it in your phone, and if you want to connect with me further, you can send me an email on this email ID, right? I would be more than happy to respond to you. And if there are any questions, I would love to answer them. And if I get enough questions in this session, then I will have another webinar in which we will discuss those questions. We'll try to get answers to those questions. And the next webinar will be done next month. I haven't figured out the date yet and the topic, but yes, it will be a very, very interactive webinar. And I want to thank all of you for being a part and a wonderful, amazing addition to these sessions. And thank you very much. So I will see you guys very soon. Please keep on checking my LinkedIn. I will keep you all posted with the new events that we are going to organize. Right? Thank you very much, everyone. Take care of yourselves, and we'll see you soon. Bye bye.